Ladies and gentlemen, and the mayoral candidates, good afternoon. Welcome to San Francisco mayoral candidates debate, specifically on this beautiful Friday afternoon. First, let me introduce our candidates. From my far left, former Supervisor Angela Aliotto, and she also was the president of the Board of Supervisors. Next, Madam London Breed, and he was acting mayor and supervisor and also president of the Board of Supervisors. Next, Richie Greenberg, business advisor. Welcome. And the next, Miss Ellen Lee Cho, family social worker. Next, we have Amy Weiser, founder and the director of St. Francis Homelessness Challenges. And Mr. Mark Lano, former supervisor, former state assemblyman, former state senator. Last but not least, Jin Kim, our current supervisor from District 6, and the former president of Board of Education, San Francisco. Welcome, all candidates. Yeah, this event is hosted by Northern California Chinese Media Association. Please join me to welcome the current president of this great organization, Mr. James Yu.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much to be here today. And on behalf of Northern California Chinese Media Association, I'd like to welcome all of you and all the candidates. I know they have a very, very busy schedule. The reason why we put this together is that I want the message of the candidate to be outreached to every single corner of San Francisco. And through the media's power, I think it will happen. And as a matter of fact, the first show will be tonight from 8 to 10 on Channel 26. So you can watch it, okay? So 2 hours detailed coverage. And also we have Channel 38 and the World Journal and also Chinese Today Radio and then Metro Radio and also UTV. All those media will cover this debate. And then at the same time, we will have simultaneous translation, okay, for the TV recording. So the whole debate will be in English. Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you, James. Thank you. My name is Kai Ping Liu. I used to work for the World Journal and the Xingtao Daily, as well as used to be a news editor for KTSF Channel 26. I am very honored to be today's MC and the moderator. In the audience, we also have Mr. Stephen Liang, the president of Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association. Welcome. And Mr. Henry Hui, the president of Huoxin Ningyang Benevolent Association. Mr. Tan Yik Choi, the president of Suixin Benevolent Association. And Mr. Thomas Ying is not here, it seems. And also Mr. Stephen Wu, also a former president of Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association. Welcome, it's very honored to have you here. And the audience, please silence your cell phone, and thanks. And the audience can ask questions by writing down the question on a piece of paper. Our volunteers will come to you to pick up the question. Thank you. Okay, now let's start our rock and roll. First, our candidates are going to give us an opening statement. Each will have 1.5 minutes. We can start from my far left. Angela, would you please? 1 minute? 1.5 minutes, sorry. Opening statement.
Okay, thank you very, very much for having us here this afternoon. It's wonderful to see so many people that are involved in this race for mayor. My name is Angela Aliotto. I was born and raised in San Francisco. My father and my grandmother were born and raised in San Francisco, right up the block on Vallejo Street. In 1990s, I was the president of the Board of Supervisors, and I wrote a lot of legislation that is concerning families, the children's budget, the youth commission. I wrote the youth commission. I did legislation that affected the Chinese community in a lot of ways. As mayor of San Francisco, I will do even more to help the Chinese community find housing, to help the Chinese community with their families. We will have programs that will make sure that families can stay in San Francisco. As a mother of 4 and the grandmother of 5, it is so important to me that families remain in San Francisco. We will house the homeless in San Francisco with a program that we know works because we did it, and we're going to do it again to take the poor people off of our streets and give them permanent supportive housing. We will also clean our streets and make sure that our small businesses in San Francisco have an opportunity to strive. Just like we let the tech companies have tax incentives, we're going to give the small businesses tax incentives. I am someone that is going to make San Francisco as small business friendly as possible. I'm sorry, I didn't know the signs were right here. So
yeah, Angela, it's time is up.
Talk too much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is London Breed. I'm president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I was born and raised in San Francisco, attended public schools, including graduating from Galileo High School. I got my undergraduate degree from UC Davis and my master's in public administration from USF. I spent a lot of time working in the city, working for Treasure Island Development Authority. I served as a San Francisco Redevelopment Agency commissioner and a fire commissioner. And I also had an amazing job in the Western Addition community as the executive director of the African American Art and Culture Complex, where every single day we work to save and change lives. I became a member of the Board of Supervisors in 2012, and the reason why I am running for mayor is because I want to make sure that the policy decisions that we make in San Francisco, that the money we spend in San Francisco actually works for the people of San Francisco. And we have so much work to do to address issues around homelessness, public safety, education, and all of the challenges that exist in our city. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for our public schools, and we have got to do a better job with making sure that the opportunities that exist in our city in healthcare, in tech, and other places are connected to our children so that they have an opportunity to participate in all the innovation going on around us. And also, we have to do more around housing. Building more housing is going to make sure that the opportunities that need to be available for young people in the future are available to them if we build more housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Richie Greenberg, and I'm running for mayor. Thanks, everybody, for arranging this debate today, and I want to thank everybody who's here in the audience. I came to San Francisco 17 years ago. My wife and I, we live in the Richmond district, which, as you know, is one of the larger immigrant areas of our city, Chinese population, Russian, Jewish. I am part of that very vibrant community there. So for 17 years, I have been not working for the government. I have been in private practice. I am a startup consultant and business advisor. And what I've done over the years is I've helped small mom and pop shops, individual entrepreneurs, and small starting up nonprofits get their launch. And this is where I come from. I don't come from a bureaucratic standpoint. I don't come with any political baggage. I come from the small business independent background. And what I want to do as mayor, which I believe would be the best thing for everyone here, and the whole city, is with my three core values of installing accountability at City Hall by restoring law and order in our city, and to uplift the quality of life. Those three core values of mine, which I will bring into City Hall, will help best address any of the issues that we have here facing our city, whether it be homelessness or auto break-ins or anything like that.
Mr. Greenberg, your time's up.
Law and order and quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. For this, please continue.
My name is Ellen Lee Zhao. I was nominated by the San Francisco Good Neighborhood for running this mayor race. I've never been a politician of my life. This is new to me, but I am not new to problem solution. I am a city and county government employee. I am a family social worker. I work for public health. My job is to solve problems that is given to me every day. I work for child crisis for 5 years. That when we have crisis in the city, I went out there to do evaluation and treatment. I also work with people who lost their license because they're driving under the influence. I do a lot of triage workers, evaluation, and deliver the quality of life. I am a mother of 2 children in college. I have lived in San Francisco for 32 years. The reason I'm running for mayor, I have a couple of areas that I really want to tackle on. Number one, I want to fight government corruption. Government has been so corrupted, we spend so much money that is not a quality of life to us. And number two, I will give back 50% of my mayor income to support the accountability base. The next one is that I'm fighting for unfair housing policies for all people in San Francisco. Once we have fair housing policy, then our housing crisis will be reduced. Then teachers will have places to live, and workers will have places. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Farrow-Weiss. It's great to be here at CCSF. I actually got my start. I was the first generation of my family to go to college, and I started in Cupertino at De Anza Community College. And that first quarter, I had a class in critical thinking, in environmental studies, and in Native American philosophy and belief. And that really shaped me for the rest of my future. And I went on to UC Santa Cruz, and I started doing service learning projects and working with at-risk youth and working in childhood education. And then I dedicated the next 15 years of my life to service. And it wasn't until after I graduated from SF State with a degree in organizational development that I started to get involved in local politics in San Francisco in 2011, because I saw that we were going in the wrong direction with City Hall after the global financial collapse. We were benefiting the banks and the property owners and the developers, not focusing on people and planet and a sustainable economy. So I bring that type of holistic and comprehensive economic analysis to this work. I have a platform that is entirely actionable and able to be developed and put into play over the next year. It's ahead of its time politically, but I think if you dig into these things, you'll see that the way that I want to heal and stabilize our multiple crises at the root will actually support people, planet, and a sustainable, healthy economy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dagaho. Thank you, Chinese Media Association, for bringing us all together today. I am Mark Leno. I have been a small business owner here in San Francisco for the past 40 years and have served on the Board of Supervisors for 4 years and 6 years in the State Assembly, 8 years in the State Senate. And together we passed some great laws, including the Homeowner Bill of Rights, as well as working with the CTA and others to keep thousands and thousands of low-income seniors and immigrants and their families in their rent-controlled units. And then additionally brought back $120 million to save City College so that this campus could remain open and that the system could continue to deliver the hope and the aspirations of everyone who wants a higher education. As your mayor, I will be a voice for Chinatown and for Chinese Americans throughout San Francisco. A voice that will give greater influence and appropriate presence in decision-making at City Hall. And that means making sure that department heads from the Chinese American community are in place, making sure that appointments for commissions and boards will represent the Chinese American community proportionately. And we also have to focus on education. So not only do we keep City College strong and free, but San Francisco State, free state, available for everyone who graduates from San Francisco City College. Thank you.
Good afternoon, 大家好, or Hakamjing-yi. My name is Jane Kim, and doja to the Northern California Association for hosting today's forum today. It has really been my honor to serve our city over the last decade, starting out on the Board of Education and now serving on the Board of Supervisor. And I started my political career here in Chinatown as a youth committee organizer for 6 years, working with young high school students to strengthen and grow their leadership to fight on behalf of their community for affordable housing, transportation, and for open space. And over my time on the board, I have been proud to fight for you. I'm proud to have negotiated and won the most affordable and middle-income housing on the Board of Supervisors over the last 7 years. And I've also been proud to be the education candidate. My parents raised me and worked very hard so that I could have good educational opportunities, which allowed me to eventually attend Stanford and UC Berkeley School of Law. And they've taught me that education is an important foundation to anyone for their opportunities. So I've worked to bring an additional $74 million to our public school system, fought and led to make City College free for all of our residents, and now fighting to make early childhood education affordable for all of our families. And finally, as mayor, I will work to make street cleaning a #1 priority and double the number of our street cleaners and publicly monitored bathrooms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Thank you, all candidates. And this, now we are going to do the question and answer, and each candidate is going to have 1.5 minutes to answer the question. My first question is, according to the U.S. Census 2010, 33% of the population in San Francisco are Asian Americans. Among them, most of are Chinese Americans. From your personal experience, what do you think is the #1 issue in the Chinese American community? And as a mayor, how do you handle this issue?
I believe that the #1 issue in the Chinese community would be housing, would be the affordable housing, something that families can afford to live and stay in San Francisco. I also think that the issue is housing of, allowing housing of in-law apartments, so that you can also have other families have housing in San Francisco. I believe that the Chinese community has had a very hard time being able to house families in the city with the lack of affordability. When we let the tech companies come into San Francisco, which, tech is very exciting and interesting, but when they came to San Francisco, they came with thousands and thousands of new employees that wanted housing. And so as a consequence, so many of our minority communities and so many of our young people and so many of the people that were housed in San Francisco lost their housing. So I believe for this community, as the author of, I'm the author of the original sanctuary law. As the author of the original sanctuary law, I believe San Francisco is a sanctuary for the Chinese and the children, families, so that we need to create that housing. Mayor Ed Lee, who was a very good friend of mine, promised 5,000 housing units a year until 2020, and I have pledged to make those 5,000, but I don't think that's enough. I believe that we need to legalize in-law apartments because so many people are coming to town and taking the housing from the Chinese community and from the Latino community and from the African American community and from the community of San Francisco.
Angela, sorry,
very, very
your
long.
time's up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think, did you say issue or issues?
Issue, the #1 issue is the Chinese community are facing, and how, as a mayor, how do you handle?
I think
Thank you.
I would agree with Supervisor Alioto in that housing is definitely an issue that's facing our Chinese community and facing San Franciscans all over the city. Between 2010 and 2015, for every 8 jobs we created 1 unit of housing. We've done no long-term strategic planning, no creative views around how we can address issues around housing. In fact, right here in Chinatown, where we are, there's a project at 88 Broadway that's going to be built. And you know what the problem is with that project? is that most of the area median income for the seniors here in Chinatown is around $12,000 a year. But they can't qualify for the affordable housing that's being built right in their community. It's one of the things that I'm fighting for and why I'm trying to get Proposition D passed, which has $10 million for subsidies for seniors, for long-term housing. We have to make sure that we're connecting the dots. Talking about abstract policies that don't necessarily connect to people mean nothing if they're not serving the people of this community. So I'm committed to doing all I can as mayor to develop a long-term plan, to provide real opportunities for housing, to make sure that we're putting the right money with the right investments for the purposes of connecting the communities who need the housing the most.
Thank you.
I agree that housing is an issue, but to me the most important is public safety. I think that all across San Francisco, if you look at the whole city as a whole, where I live in the Richmond District, I believe I'm the only candidate that lives in the Richmond District, I think. We have a very harmonious relationship. We are not in the same situation as what might be here in Denton in Chinatown. But everyone across the city is concerned with their public safety, their personal safety. Crime, auto break-ins, muggings of elderly Chinese people, especially I've heard now around in Japantown, a lot of Chinese are being targeted. This is gonna have to stop, and how I will do it is to ensure that we have enough police. We need more police on the beat. We need more police hired. We are understaffed. We don't have enough that are actually physically working on the beat. So I will ensure that we have those numbers brought up so that way they can install more of a law and order atmosphere. And also the police department then needs to then work with the different communities, including the Chinese community, Chinese-speaking officers as well, to protect our lives, our personal property. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am 101 Chinese. I live in Chinatown, I grew up in Chinatown, I come to Chinatown every Sunday. And I am a public social worker. I've seen a lot of issues within the Chinese community. The number one issue that we have is family. When we have family, we fight with each other, but we live with each other. We live in generations together in one house. The most important thing in our Chinese community and the Asian community, we do not want any recreational or cannabis store at all next to us. That's the most important thing that we want in the Chinese community. Secondly, we do not want anything from the career politicians telling us what they're going to do when they are before they elected. But after elected, see what kind of problem we're facing in the Chinese community. We have no protection. We have lack of protection from the DA office, from the police office. Richard was right. We were targeted. Chinese are targeted for crime. But who help us? We have crying out loud to make reports, but only reports. There's no intervention. That is not acceptable for the people who are currently in office. If they are so good, then we will not face the problems we have. Then I will not be running for mayor's race today. I was nominated because we were so discriminated and we were harassed at City Hall. Family, that's what we need. Thank you.
Thank you.
I worked for the San Francisco Community Land Trust for a while as the operation manager, and many of you know the Community Land Trust worked with Chinatown CDC and the Asian Law Caucus to be able to save a collection of apartments that was mostly very low-income Chinese residents, the Columbus United Collaborative. Anybody in here know of that, CUC? And so they were able to save that group of people from being displaced and evicted with that building being demolished. And so I think that displacement and preventing displacement is the #1 issue right now facing the Chinatown community. And so it's very important that everybody work together to pass Prop F this June, which if we vote for that, that will mean that if you are going to be evicted, if you receive an eviction notice, you will get free legal counsel. That's very important. And it's very important, like Supervisor Breed was talking about, we need a comprehensive strategic plan for the future that raises all boats for everyone and doesn't promote displacement. And with the Central Soma plan, everybody in this room should be concerned that it's 50,000 new tech jobs and 7,000 units, and that's going to cause a new wave of displacement right after we've stabilized from this one. So it's very important that we connect those jobs to CCSF students and graduates, SFUSD, SF State, and we make those linkages so we don't see massive displacement in 10 years from now.
Give me time. Thank you.
As I travel around the city and talk with the Chinese American community here in Chinatown, in Visitation Valley, in the Portola, in the Sunset, in the Richmond, I'm hearing a couple of things. First and foremost, of course, the need for more affordable housing, which is why I wrote the Affordable Housing Local Ordinance 18 years ago, which has produced thousands and thousands and continues to produce affordable housing, as well as amending the Ellis Act so we can keep renters, seniors, immigrants in their homes. But I'm also hearing a lot of concern for small businesses, for our merchant districts, for small business owners who are facing a lot of challenges. Higher and higher rents, even though we have a glut of retail space, as well as the shift to online purchasing. So we've got to make sure we do everything possible, be as creative as possible to keep our small business districts alive and well. And a couple of ideas I think that would help. Here in Chinatown, a Chinese museum and arts culture center, so that we can recount the very proud, if challenged, history of Chinese Americans here in San Francisco, and also celebrate art and music and dance and culture and food and language to keep the community vibrant. But then also a visitor center, working with San Francisco Travel so that we can make Chinatown the destination spot it should be, to bring more people into the area so our small businesses can be revived and thrive. So there's some great ideas out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do believe the three top issues for the Chinese and Asian American community here in San Francisco are housing, public safety, and education. But since we were asked to pick one, I will talk about the importance of housing. We need to make sure that San Francisco is building more affordable housing and middle-income housing. We are seeing many seniors that can't afford to continue to live in their community close to their health services and hospitals and senior programs. And we're also finding that many of our families that immigrate to San Francisco are living in single-room occupancy hotels here in Chinatown that make up 60% of our housing stock. We need to help our seniors and our families get into stable, affordable housing throughout San Francisco. We also need to support our small homeowners, our Chinese American small homeowners who work multiple jobs and place multiple households in a single family so that they can afford to buy a home and live here in San Francisco. We're increasingly hearing that as we strengthen tenant protections, which are important to protect our residents, that we also need to help homeowners who want to be good landlords by explaining the law and providing legal support in Chinese languages. And I'm absolutely committed to doing both.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. My second question is about marijuana. Alan mentioned that earlier. Coincidentally, today is April the 20th. Coincidentally, today is April the 20th. We all know what is going on in Golden Gate Park now. Maybe our second question, starting from President Lyndon Breed, then we just do like this in turn. Sorry, And the Supervisor Aaron Paskin introduced a piece of legislation to ban the marijuana store in Chinatown. But we are not only have Chinatown, but we also have like Sunset, Richmond, Visitation Valley, and San Bruno Avenue corridor. So the Chinese community just don't like marijuana stores in their neighborhood. So in your point of view, what do you think about the banning those marijuana stores in Chinese consent resident area? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm actually a co-sponsor of Supervisor Peskin's legislation to ban marijuana shops here in Chinatown, mostly because overwhelmingly the community here has expressed that they don't want them here, and I respect that and I support that. Just like formula retail restrictions that have existed where we look at neighborhood by neighborhood and what neighborhoods want in their commercial corridors, I think that we should do the same with marijuana shops for any part of our city. So I have worked closely with members of the Board of Supervisors in light of the laws that have allowed these particular locations to provide recreational sales and use to come up with a policy that's a standard policy for the city and county of San Francisco. But I've always made it clear that I am open to having discussions that with each community for the purposes of determining what the community wants. And I don't necessarily think that a blanket policy on any particular ban is the right approach. I think that we have to work with different neighborhoods to come up with neighborhood-driven solutions like we're doing right here in Chinatown.
So there's two ways that we can look at marijuana, this phenomenon. One is that we are all adults, or we should all be adults and be able to make our own decisions on whether or not this is something that we want to partake in, just like alcohol. You don't have to drink it, you don't have to buy it. But since it is so controversial and there's nothing really of any benefit out of it to most people, and it's recreational, I believe then it should be restricted on where it would be, or how it would be dispensed, where it would be dispensed, what neighborhoods, the proximity to any schools, housing, or in commercial districts. So in my opinion then, I would oppose it, of course, being open a store near a school, and it should just be in certain retail areas and corridors, not a blanket policy throughout the city.
Thank you. Out of the 8 people right here, I'm one of the 8 candidates. I am the only person that had guts and a heart for all of you sitting in here today. I took many groups, went to the federal building and asked for federal help because the local people, local representatives, they're sitting right here, 2 of them currently, Board of Supervisors. They disrespect our voices, especially the parents and grandparents. As a public employee, one of my job duties is to do drug rehab for people who lost their license. I was very devastated. The whole Chinese community was devastated. Chinese American accounted for 35%. We are property owners, 35%. If people don't want it, then stay out of it. But yet, that's not what we experience. 3 days ago, on this April 16th, I again went back to the Attorney General office at the federal building and asked them to ban April 20th, which is today. I also wrote to all Board of the Supervisors and the Mayor's office to ban them. It's very simple. Even cannabis is legalized, but it's not legalized in federal law. This is a misleading information in the community. It is illegal. It is no different than a criminal. All Board of Supervisors and the mayor's office staff, they are no different than criminals when we go to federal law. And it's very misleading, unfortunately, to our public.
Ellen, sorry.
I worked in the medical cannabis field for 2 years and worked with thousands of patients suffering from cancer, cerebral palsy, dementia, pain, all of these different types of things where they were using cannabis as a medicinal aid for well-being. There were people that were coming from other states with their children who had seizures because cannabis was the only medicine that would actually help them. When the central nervous system evolved hundreds of millions of years ago, interestingly enough, there are all these receptors in that system that cannabis fits like a lock and key into and can regulate pain receptors, it can regulate sleep and hunger and things of that nature. And so I was able, actually, my dad's a veteran, and I was able to get him off of Valium and using a cannabis gummy before he goes to sleep. My mom had knee surgery and is able to use a high CBD cannabis ratio that doesn't make you high.
I used to go out to nursing homes and work with elders and let them know about cannabis as a healing agent. As mayor, I will make sure that we have a focus on mindful consumption of cannabis and use it as a healing aid. In the states where medical cannabis is legal, we see a 25% reduction of opioid overdose. I want to make it so that people who are using and selling meth and heroin are able to transition to selling and using cannabis as a harm reduction tool. Thank you.
Supervisor Peskin, whose endorsement I'm very appreciative of, and I have had many conversations about this subject, and I have told him that I support his proposal for the ban in Chinatown. Very dense area with very certain opinion about how this would work in this neighborhood. Beyond, in other neighborhoods, I think that neighborhood voices should be a part of a community process to determine where there will be other retail outlets.
I am also a co-sponsor of Supervisor Peskin's ordinance to ban medical and cannabis dispensaries in the Chinatown neighborhood. And I'm also one of 4 supervisors in November that voted to keep cannabis and medical cannabis 1,000 feet away from our schools and childcare centers. Myself, Supervisor Tang, Supervisor Safai, and Supervisor Yi were the only 4 that voted to keep cannabis dispensaries 1,000 feet away from our schools and our childcare centers. As this industry grows with the legalization in California, I think it's important to have a balance, and we want to make sure that our children and families are safe. And this doesn't just go for cannabis; it also goes for liquor stores as well. Our families don't want their children exposed to these things at such a young and early age. And I wrote an op-ed piece in the Examiner with Supervisor Katie Tang explaining why we felt so strongly about this position on behalf of our families. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
谢谢. I wrote the medicinal marijuana law in 1992, 93, after my husband died of a very, very painful cancer. And the last few months of his life, myself and my 4 children were able to have him come downstairs to the dinner table. So it made the pain go away. When they took it away from him, it was horrible until the day he died. So as a legislator, I wrote the law, and we passed the law in San Francisco for medicinal marijuana. Today now, marijuana generally, cannabis generally, CBD generally is legal in the state of California. It's a totally different issue than medicinal marijuana. Medicinal marijuana is for the very, very sick. And that's exactly what I meant it to be. What I love about what the Chinese community has done, they've gotten together with the government and decided they didn't want it in their neighborhood, and that coalition created something that disallows it in the neighborhood, and I think that's fantastic. I think that more communities need to get together with the government and decide what is good for their community, because not everything that's good for this community is good for the other communities and vice versa. So I congratulate the Chinese community. I am for the ban in the Chinese community 100%. But I think what's wonderful that came out of this was the coming together with the government to get the job done.
Thank you, all the candidates. Thank you. My third question is about homelessness. Mayor Art Agnes had $399 for each of the people on the street, and Mayor Frank Jordan had his Matrix program, cite and even arrest the people sleeping in the parks, on sidewalks, or begging aggressively. Then Mayor Willie Brown criticized the Matrix program when he was running for the mayor, but after he won the seat, he did something similar to Matrix mayor. Then we have Mayor Gavin Newsom's Care Not Cash. And I remember the day after the election, Mayor Gavin Newsom, then Mayor-elect Gavin Newsom went to Angelo Aliotto's office to ask you to appoint you to take charge of the program called the 10-year plan to end homelessness in San Francisco. That was over 10 years ago. First to answer the question.
Okay,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate the question. So there are a couple, and nothing's ever easy to answer here in San Francisco. There are multiple concerns here. And I don't want to create any catchy sounding program names or anything like that. We have to first classify who is living actually out on the streets and who is somehow sheltered and they are not out exposed to the elements. Definitions of who is homeless can range from those who are out on the sidewalks and those who simply don't have a lease in their name but are staying with a relative or on a couch in some friend's house. And so, first of all, I believe that we really need to take a much tougher stance on this, and I now propose that we have a three-phase solution to this. The first thing is I would want to declare a state of emergency here, that we cannot have any individual that is still out on the sidewalk, sleeping outside. This is a humanitarian crisis, and it has not been addressed, it has not been changed for years. It's a failure. Whatever 10-year plan that was enacted, that ended 4 or 5 years ago. I don't have enough time to complete it. So the second thing to do then is we need to slow down or stop the influx of those who are already homeless somewhere else to come here and live here. And the third is to install accountability with the nonprofit agencies who are rendering services.
Mr. Greenberg, thank you.
Well, you're talking to the right person. I am a public health social worker, and I am a front person and treat homeless. It's one of my job duties. 60% of the homeless, they are not capable of living on their own. That's called mentally ill or physical ill or some kind of illness. 15% people, approximately 15% people, they are working class. The other people, we call them professional homeless, coming from other cities. No individual people in here can solve the homeless problem. Nobody. Because every time we house homeless, we get new homeless to come. In order for us to address the homeless, I have a plan to help. Eliminate all homeless, no homeless allowed on the street. That's what we need. And create navigation centers and isolation treatment centers and group them together, just like Richard said earlier. It has to be treatment and find people with job and help them, train them to be able independently. But right now, the government is so corrupted, the money spent on homeless, that is more money we spend, the more homeless we have. That is called government corruption. I will find an agent to do government accountability, number one thing. That's what I want to do, government corruption. We have to eliminate that in order for the money to be used in homeless. Spend $6,000 a person, a homeless a month is not acceptable. Thank you.
In 2015, I ran for mayor and received 80,000, nearly 80,000 first, second, and third place votes. And one of the reasons why people voted for me is because I wanted to treat the encampment and shelter shortage crisis as a true crisis. 3 weeks after the election in November 2015, I started the St. Francis Homelessness Challenge. And I started to work with people living on the street in large encampments. I worked with 3 large encampments, and I started to try to work with those encampment residents, the impacted neighbors and businesses nearby, and the people working for the city in the Department of Public Works, Department of Public Health, homelessness, et cetera, SFPD officers. We spend $30 million a year in San Francisco on a move-along strategy to shuffle homeless people from block to block. $30 million with DPW and SFPD. I developed a new way of dealing with this called the You Belong strategy, where we could actually get 3,000 people into safe, organized spaces with reasonable rules and agreements, because there are 3,000 people or more that are living on the street tonight without access to a toilet, secure sleep and storage, organization, or pathways to healing and housing. Do not accept anything less from any of these candidates that they must stabilize the 3,000 people living in crisis on our streets by next year. Make sure they do that.
Our first task in dealing with homelessness is to make sure that we keep those who have a home in a home. And that's why I work to write a law to keep over 12,000 low-income seniors and immigrants and disabled people in their homes. We also have to do everything we can to protect our most affordable and valuable affordable housing stock, which are our rent-controlled units. Beyond that, I have a plan which you can find at markleno.com, which will end street homelessness. That's the 3,500 people who are living on our streets every night, getting them off the streets and into homes and shelters. But we should also be thinking down the road. How do we keep San Francisco more vibrant so that we can have healthier communities, healthier business communities, and that our children can have a more hopeful future? And that's investing in education. We need to close the achievement gap. We have to make sure that our teachers have a place to live so that they can continue to do their jobs, which is why we also wrote a law that builds affordable housing for teachers on school property. And then to follow up on free city, we need free state. So every student in San Francisco who has the dream, the hope, the aspiration of a higher education can get that here in San Francisco. And that way we have a much healthier San Francisco.
We do have a homelessness crisis on our streets, a problem that has grown over the last 40 years because the federal government has divested in spending money on building housing for our country since 1980. Before 1980, homelessness wasn't a crisis in cities across our country, but it has become ever since we have stopped spending money in building housing as we used to in the mid-20th century. There's about 17,000 people that come to our homeless support services on any given year. Of that 17,000, there's approximately 7,000 that sleep on our streets or in our shelter on any given night. The majority of our homeless count is just economically and housing insecure, meaning they work, they have jobs, they have families, but they can't afford their rent in their SRO hotel or in their rent-controlled unit to stay in place in their houses. For those hardworking citizens, we should expand our rent subsidy program to help families and individuals stay in their home so we don't have to pay for them when they end up in our shelter system or our streets. For the 3,000 to 4,000 that are chronically homeless and very sick, we need to take at least 50% of those individuals off our streets immediately and into medical shelters where they get access to nurses, clinicians, and psychologists to help support their health needs, drug abuse, and other needs, and so that they are not out on the streets, which is a public health crisis.
In 2004, I joined with Mayor Gavin Newsom to do the 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness. We housed over 4,000 chronically homeless people in permanent supportive housing. By 2008, we had moved into the general homeless population and were housing the general homeless population in housing up until 2012. By 2012, you did not see any people sleeping in the main streets of our town. We did a great job. The 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness worked, and I'm going to do it again. In 2012, the buildings were taken out of it, the buildings that were supposed to be for the formerly homeless, and the money was taken away. So from 2012 to 2018, today, you can put people through all the navigational centers in the world that you want, But if it doesn't have a place for them to go at the end of their stay, then they're going to go right back to the street. And the last thing we want to do in the city and county of San Francisco is put people back into the horrible situation they were in. When I'm Mayor Alioto, I will pick people up off the streets within 48 hours and give them emergency services, moving them into programs that then move them in to either permanent supportive housing or into a hospitalization situation that they're needed because of the severity of their illness from living on the streets in one of the richest cities in the world.
A few years ago, I worked with Mayor Lee, and we were able to identify 179 empty public housing units in need of repair that had been empty for years. We quickly went into action, dedicated $2 million, renovated those units, and got 179 formerly homeless families housed right away. A program in my district called Take It to the Streets, which was a program that was just basically collecting donations from local merchants to house individuals. We worked together, got this person some public and private partnership money, now is housing 64 transitional age youth. You know, providing opportunities for housing is something that we have to do on a regular basis with our homeless population, one person at a time. Not everyone is the same. Everyone has a number of challenges that exist, and what I notice by being out there on the streets talking to people is there are clearly challenges with mental illness. I am prepared to do what's necessary to reform our mental health system so that it's not treated as a criminal issue but as a public health issue. Reforming that issue, getting people into treatment and getting them the support they need is the only way that we're going to get them housed and keep them housed. Because what we see now are people who are on our streets, sadly arrested, go through the 5150 process where they're held for 72 hours and right back on our streets. We have got to be bold, and we have to change that, and as mayor, I will change that and make the difference.
Thank you, candidates. My next question is, Supervisor Terrence Helena introduced a piece of legislation to legalize all the in-law units in the city back 20 plus years ago, but did not work out. We have thousands of in-law units in San Francisco. Recent board members, Aaron Paskin, Mark Farrell, Scott Wiener, David Chu, they all tried to do something to address this issue. But still, it's a big issue our city is facing. As the mayor, how do you address these in-law units?
That is a very good question, and you asked the right person. My name is Ellen Li Zhao. Remember, I keep saying I'm a social worker. I have a video program in the Chinese community. You understand we have 35% property ownership. The law was targeted to the Asian family because we were owners. It was not working is because it cost $200,000 to about $250,000 a renovation. Therefore, a regular family do not have the money. So when they have the law, there's only about how many people? 20 families? That's one. The other one is that most of the units already remodeled. They have no unit, though they have no permit. So if the government wants to be helpful, legalize it. It's called amnesty. Give it away. Ask them to fill out the form and charge them per permit and help them regulate it with enough renovations and ventilations and light. And according to what the housing code, that's what we need in the community. And small property owner has been sued for no reasons. Or many of the ethical attorneys and illegal system that is not legal and suing and target Asian population. And when I am as elected mayor, that's exactly what I want to do. Help the people overcome the problem so they can immediately release many of those housing units to help the teachers and workers who are locally in here and absolutely in housing crisis need. Thank you.
In 2015, the planning department did an assessment of the parcels of San Francisco and found that 37 parcels could have an additional dwelling unit or an in-law unit. And then just last year, there was new legislation that said that you don't need a conditional use hearing to be able to add that additional unit, which makes it easier to streamline that process. So 3 years ago when I ran for mayor, I put forward a proposal that what we could do is go to those property owners, especially small property owners, and say, if you sign here, we'll provide the 0% interest financing and the construction support and design if you agree to rent to one of our workforce or families at no more than 30% net of their income. And so this is a win-win for everyone, because as that loan is being paid off with rent, it's providing affordable housing to one of our workforce and families. And so now that we passed that legislation last year, there already were quite a few of these in-law units that were done illegally at the time. And so I think there should be more of a partnership with the Mayor's Office of Housing and DBI and the Planning Department to bring those above ground. But there has to be a give and take, and so if we support that property owner in getting their unit up to code, I want them to agree to rent to one of our workforce or families at no more than 30% net income. Thank you.
As we look at the different and varied ways that we have access to in addressing our affordable housing crisis, and we build affordable housing through our mandate, the inclusionary zoning ordinance. We also are purchasing through our small property acquisition of 5 to 25 unit apartment buildings, take them off the speculative market, pass affordable housing bonds. One additional creative way is through these accessory dwelling units. And they are affordable by design. Because they are small and in many cases already there, we can make benefit for the city and for communities with as minimal impact on the additional density for those neighborhoods. Supervisor Peskin was very effective in moving that legislation forward, and I attended one of his first evenings to bring community folks who were interested in moving forward with bringing their accessory dwelling units under the law. And there were over 1,000 people at the Jewish Community Center that night. And it was very exciting to see all of the interest in pursuing what this new legislation, which he had authored, put forward. So this is another piece in the puzzle. It's not the solution, but it's certainly a solution. And I congratulate Supervisor Peskin for his success.
As all the candidates have said, we should be encouraging both the legalization and the creation of accessory dwelling units or in-law units, because we can build those units more quickly and more affordably for the families and teachers and individuals that need housing today in San Francisco. But in 2014, when then Supervisor David Chu introduced his ordinance to legalize in-law units, I served on the Land Use Committee. And I was on record saying that I didn't believe that this ordinance would legalize any additional in-law units, because the cost of bringing them up to code with Department of Building Inspection and the Fire Department would far exceed what the unit could bring in. And so if we truly want to help homeowners legalize in-law units, bring more units online to the market, and help increase the value of a single family home here in San Francisco, we need to institute a low interest or no interest construction loan program to help homeowners do it, and consider a 5-year property tax rebate so that while homeowners are gathering value for the additional unit of housing they put out on the market, we're giving them a discount on their property taxes while that value generates. Thank you very much.
What amazes me about this issue, ladies and gentlemen, is that we have been discussing it for 20 years. Nobody's done it. Just do it. Sure, there will be obstacles. Just do it. Don't let the obstacles get in your way. If the planning code or the zoning or the whatever is a problem, fix it. Get it done. We need to make in-law apartments legal so that we can have the housing and so that it's a benefit to the homeowner who is also struggling with everything that's happening to San Francisco. Indeed, I believe that we should have some of these business areas that need to be rezoned, where we can make some of these vacancies that are ruining our business areas, make some of these vacancies the possibility of live-ins for single family, for small families, or for couples, or for single people, because the housing is what is the most important thing. We have in-laws apartments all over San Francisco. San Francisco was built in 2 and 3 and 4 layers, where the bottom floor originally was for the horses and the carriages, right? And that we have hundreds, and if not thousands, of homes in San Francisco that could be beautiful in-law apartments. So we need to fix the planning code and make this happen instead of talking about it for another 20 years.
You know, it's interesting that we're having the discussion about this today, mostly because I introduced legislation at the Board of Supervisors a couple of weeks ago to understand that after we passed the law in 2016, why only 23 of those units have actually been built, with over 526 applications in the process. I think part of the biggest challenge we continue to have, is bureaucratic layers of process that get in the way of real production. And all these new laws created that make it even more complicated, when all we're trying to do is deliver a few hundred units that could make a significant difference in the housing market. And so as mayor, my plan is to make sure that we're not adding just extra bureaucratic layers, that we're looking at an opportunity to make it easier for the property owners, specifically by providing a reduction in fees or something else that they're paying into the city for the purposes of owning their property, making it financially feasible so that they can actually move forward in this process to do this particular development could be a great opportunity. But also, we need to make sure, especially with a lot of our senior property owners, that they have someone who can support them in the process. They need someone potentially that could help them understand exactly what can be done. And I think the city can play an important role. Instead of just basically closing the door and saying you didn't fill out an application right, why aren't we working more closely with property owners to actually make it happen? And that's what I plan to do as mayor.
That's right.
So what I find interesting after listening to the other candidates here, it's as if this is some sort of a program that's going to be launched, that they have this vision. From what I then see is if they're not looking around in the rest of the city here. They actually aren't walking the streets, they're not looking at the different neighborhoods. Why am I saying this? Because the in-laws already exist now. People already live in in-laws right now and have been for years. You can find listings on Craigslist and other areas. You can rent an in-law right now. The difference is whether it's legal or illegal. If you want to call them illegal, unregistered, unapproved, no permit, there's tons of them around the city right now, everywhere. I live in the Richmond district, as I said. Right from my apartment window, I'm a renter, by the way. I see right out my back window, in the backyards of all the other buildings. There are usually 2, 3, 4, or 6 unit apartments. And in the back, you can see little buildings that have been built there. Or how many in the Richmond and Sunset districts or west of Twin Peaks, how many of the garages have been converted into units? And they're already here. The question is whether or not we should be taxing them, adding them into compliance. And so, as I said, they are already here.
Thank you, candidates. The next question is, Supervisor Calvin Shelley talked many times about a free muni to everybody 20 years ago in order to increase the ridership of public transportation and reduce the congestion of our streets. Do you think it's still a good idea to offer free muni to everybody in order to address our traffic issue?
I think it's a great idea, and then the devil's always in the details, right? How do you make it a reality? One of the things that we can think about in terms of making it a reality is that currently at the federal level, Donald Trump and the Republicans cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. And so there was big savings for corporations at the federal tax level. But we have an opportunity to actually work with those local corporations in San Francisco, regional corporations, and state, and capture some of that money, not all perhaps of that tax savings, but a good percentage of it, so that local companies can be investing in the infrastructure, the transit, the housing and the education for their workforce and their customer base and for their neighborhoods. And so it's important for us, whoever becomes mayor over the next year and whoever becomes our governor, to be thinking about how is it that we work with our local corporations to invest in this. We also, unfortunately, the Lee administration looked the other way to Uber and Lyft and didn't think about how we could locally regulate that in order to make sure that we were having a fair share and taxi drivers were left out of that process. We should invest in also taxi rides for low-income residents. We already have a subsidized program for that. But let's talk about this over the next year of how we get access to free muni. Let's make it a reality.
The number one challenge for us with our congestion and immobility in San Francisco is to provide viable, dependable choices. So there are options crossing town other than in the automobile. We must be investing more in our transit system, but we should also be looking at best practices in other cities. Denver, Portland, Seattle, they do have free zones for their public transit system. And in those free zones, the use goes up exponentially. People use the transit and they get out of their cars. So we know that it does work, and we should be looking at how they have funded those free zones. And it's an important issue because today, as we see muni fares continue to rise, it can actually be less expensive for a family of 4 or 5 to actually get into their car and rather than use transit. And if using the automobile is less expensive than using transit, we can be certain that there's very little incentive for people to get out of their cars. And the cars, of course, when there is no other option, causes more congestion, puts more particulate matter into the air, challenges our children's health, rates of asthma goes up. We need to also be conscious of making sure our air is clean and that we're doing our part in lowering greenhouse gas emissions to fight climate change.
While on the Board of Supervisors, I strongly supported free muni for youth and for seniors and individuals with disabilities. Now, in the end, the final program was free muni for low-income youth, seniors, and people with individualism. But I believe that we should expand this to all seniors, all youth, and all individuals with disabilities. They should be able to ride muni for free. Today, as a Metropolitan Transportation Commission, where I sit on a 9-Bay Area County Commission, I've been advocating for a regional discount pass for low-income households. We know that transportation is often the number 2 or number 3 expense in any working-class family's budget. We know also that low-income families take more than one operator. It's not just Muni. They also take BART, AC Transit, Golden Gate, Sam's Trans. We need one card that will allow low-income households to use a discount pass all across the region to get to work, to school, and other activities. Finally, I really believe that not just making Muni free, but we also have to expand our Muni services. We need more buses, and we need longer buses and longer trains. We should never have a one-car NJUDA or T third train again. Each of them should have 2 to 3 trains minimum so we can increase capacity so more people can move through the city when the train or bus comes.
I absolutely believe that Muni should be free for the youth and for the elderly and for the disabled. So everybody says the devil is in the details, as Amy says, and I've heard all over the place. Let me tell you how we pay for this. Lyft, Uber, and Chariot do a business in the city and county of San Francisco. 60 to 70,000 cars a day, and they don't pay a business tax. I'm a civil rights trial lawyer. My little office is down the block. I pay business taxes. Uber, Lyft, and Chariot need to pay business taxes that would go towards the elderly and the youth and the disabled being free on all of our transportation facilities in the city and county of San Francisco. I think that's only the fair and right thing to do. I have to go to a commission hearing, so I want to thank you all so very, very much for having me here. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I can stay for one more question. I don't know. It depends on the time. Thank you so much.
I grew up in San Francisco, and I attended public schools, and sadly, there were times where my grandmother couldn't afford to buy the $5 Muni passes that were available for purchase. And what I see now sometimes with some of our young people who sneak onto the bus and the tickets that they're getting from police officers, I'm very frustrated by that. I think that, you know, police officers should be on the buses to keep people safe, and not to continue to go after what seems to be mostly young people for the purposes of providing a ticket. And the system, we passed free Muni for youth, and I'm really proud of the work we did to do that, but the application process sometimes is really challenging to connect to a lot of young people in low-income communities. I think what's important for us to do is just have a standard policy for everyone. Either we're going to provide free Muni for youth and for seniors and disabled, period, or we're not. Because right now, the process, the system, the layers, it is not necessarily working as efficiently as I believe it can to support the communities that we're trying to support in the city. Would I support free Muni for every San Franciscan? Yes, and let me tell you why. Because our streets are congested, and I think that we want to encourage people as much as possible to use public transportation. And I do agree with Supervisor Alioto, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied, that we should charge the companies, the shuttle buses and the tech companies and others to help us pay for the cost of providing this service to all San Franciscans, which will include their employees as well.
So as we've heard the expression, the devil is in the details. Nothing in life is ever free. It is subsidized by someone. There's a tax put on someone or some company or some business, which I will oppose. We can't keep adding more taxes and assessments on everyone and everything to be able to afford our lives. We can't keep doing this. But we have to look instead at what are the problems, just Muni itself. Muni is the transportation, of course, but it doesn't meet everybody's needs. The children who need to get to school, because we have this phenomenon of the lottery system of where children get to go to school, which is not the closest neighborhood school to them, then their parents have to drive them. And often they're driving them across town. And so because of that, that adds to the morning commute, the traffic congestion. That has nothing to do with Muni. And afterwards, after school, the children have to be taken from school by their parents, potentially across town again, to a doctor's appointment, to piano lessons and tutoring and after-school other activities. So it's a much more complex situation than just say, make Muni free, and that will save everybody. That is not what's going to happen. Thank you.
I am a local resident for the last 32 years. I occasionally ride the bus and sometimes drive. When I ride the bus, this is what I see. Congestion, homeless, feces, sometimes you see other stuff. You even see needles on buses. So in order for us to supply, it has to be a demand. I agree with certain things in here, but disagree with some areas. There's no free lunch we learn in America. If we give out free to people, it tells people that there's an entitlement. I like the idea, if they want free fast pass, they have to do something to earn it. Not just to wait in line on the welfare office to get a free, pass. People learn how to cheat, how to lie to get in low income. People learn how to cheat, how to lie, how to get a free bus because they're low income, they're old or disabled. Look at the disabled parking plot that we have. It's all disabled in Chinatown. You see this? So in order for us to be a fair community, If you want to give it to seniors, give it to all, but not just disabled, but all. Same thing with youth, all, but not just poor. This way will eliminate the entitlement. It's just to help people in a fair sense so they learn how to earn something. It's not giving for free. Someone pays for it. We learn it from America. There's no free lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Now I would like to invite Mr. Stephen Liang, the president of Chinese 6 companies, to ask a question. Mr. Liang, please.
Thank you. My question that I have for all the candidates already been asked, so I just want to repeat it again. San Francisco, about the homeless problem that we have. San Francisco is a world-famous tourist city. Our homeless problem has damaged our image. Homeless problem in San Francisco has turned into a critical stage and is a crisis right now. It is a health and safety issue for all San Franciscans. Our homeless population has seen a steady growth. The city only has some band-aid solution to this problem by setting up temporary SRO shelters, navigation center, shower or bathroom facilities to help the homeless. I would like to hear from the candidates how they would address the homeless issues. I would like to hear some long-term solution to fix this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemon. This is clearly the #1 issue I hear about wherever I am traveling around town. And as I mentioned earlier, I do have a plan to end street homelessness by 2020. About 3,500 people living on our streets any one night. We do have about 1,500 empty single-room occupancies today. That's according to the Department of Building Inspection and the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. So these can be permanent and supportive housing units. We would also bring in the social services to make sure that these formerly homeless people are successful in their housing. We know we have a waiting list of 1,000 people every night who would like to get off the street and into a shelter bed, which is temporary, but would be better off the street. We have a mess in our streets because we have 3,500 people living where they shouldn't be living. And the status quo is not working for anybody. It's not working for families who want to be able to take a walk down the block with their children and the dog. It's certainly not working for small business owners who have to move a body before they can even open their front door and maybe even clean up a mess to start the day's business. And it's certainly not working for those who are suffering on the street. So we can do this. We have to reject cynicism. We can believe that we can do better. And with a mental health justice center to help those who are dealing with mental health and addiction issues, we can assess, diagnose them, and treat them so they're not recycled back to the street without a caseworker or any health plan. Thank you.
Homelessness is a crisis in all of our cities, not just in San Francisco's, but in cities throughout our country. And unfortunately, it is the outcome of 40 years of our federal government divesting from building housing for working class and middle class families throughout the country. 40 years later, we are now dealing with a problem that is much older, where people are aging in place in our streets and are becoming incredibly sick. As I had mentioned, we need a multi-pronged approach to addressing homelessness. There's a huge portion of our homeless count that is working, primarily families, that we need to help make housing affordable and education affordable and transportation affordable for, so they can continue to afford to live in the city that they work in and part of the community that they're a part of. But for the 3,000 to 4,000 people that many of our residents see, who are homeless and chronically homeless and very sick. We need to provide a shelter bed for them that is off the streets. Over the last couple of years, I have seen more homeless individuals in Chinatown than I've ever seen before. And it's not because our homeless count has gone up. It is because there are less places for them to hide. We should be providing a shelter bed so that we can get at least 50% of them off of our streets immediately and to get the medical care they need so that we can get them into permanent supportive housing.
I am committed to getting all of the tent encampments off the street within the first year that I take office. I think it's important here in San Francisco that we focus on what's happening and we take street behavior seriously. Part of what we know is happening on our streets are people are suffering from mental illness and addiction challenges. And we have to tackle those issues head on. But we also have to think about ways in which we can keep people housed. We know from some of the data that close to 70% of people who are experiencing homelessness are people who are actually housed in San Francisco. So I want to make sure we pass my right to civil council legislation, but more importantly, as mayor, I will make sure that it is funded so anyone who is facing an eviction in our city doesn't have to do so alone. And we also, as a city, we have to build more housing. We have to have a long-term strategic plan about building more housing for different income levels. Because what is missing in the equation, yes, navigation centers are great for a transition. Yes, we can focus on doing what's necessary to address mental health and issues with addiction, but we also have to make sure that there's enough housing that exists in San Francisco in general for everyone. And so I'm committed to developing a long-term strategic plan that focuses on identifying underutilized sites like we did in my district. The McDonald's site at Haight and Stanton. We purchased that site. We're going to build 100% affordable housing, and we have got to do that all across the city.
I'm glad this question has come up again, so now I can continue with what I was trying to say earlier. So I have a 3-phase plan how to deal with homelessness on an urgent, immediate manner. First of all, as mayor, I will declare a state of emergency. We cannot have individuals sleeping or remaining homeless out on the streets. What does this mean? Well, picture what we've seen in the media whenever there's an earthquake or, unfortunately, a hurricane in Florida, Texas, Puerto Rico. FEMA-style small mobile homes, okay? So we have to find a place here in the city, for example, Pier 30, 32, or down near Candlestick Point. The area over there is large enough to be able to bring in hundreds, potentially hundreds, and whatever it is that we can figure out how many can actually fit there responsibly. Bring in those FEMA-style mobile homes, 2, 3-bedroom each. Then we can bring all of those individuals who are living right now on the streets into there. And they could stay there safely, securely, warm, with all the services that are necessary, with support services and storage lockers to put the personal effects. So that way, that would satisfy the legislation now that we have the rules on tent housing. Tents cannot be moved. Well, now they can be moved. Then we have to go and speak with all of the nonprofit organizations and ensure that they are all working in an accountable manner and install accountability so that way they're not just getting funds from us and not using it responsibly.
Mr. Greenberg, thank you.
What I'm going to say may not be comfortable to all of you. As a frontline person, when I do assessment for homeless, I look at their face, I look at their age, I look at their background, and I look at their race. You do not see a lot of Chinese on the street, do you? You do not see a lot of Asian people on the street, do you? But yet, our population is the biggest and largest in San Francisco. Why? We stay out from drugs. That is why that we keep fighting no recreational cannabis in every corner. Because originally, these people in here, professional politicians, they want to open 300 cannabis stores in every neighborhood. That's why we form a coalition of good neighborhood to protect each other. 60% people are sick. They're not able. I have many people came to me with an idea. Isolate them in Angel Island. That will be one place to start. You cannot treat the homeless person when they are not willing to do so. In order for us to do so, we have to talk to them one by one. What are they wanted to do? What do they want to do? Many of them, they wanted to stay on the street. When I am as mayor, no homeless is allowed in San Francisco. We immediately tell the whole world, we do not welcome new homeless in San Francisco. We will work with the faith community to ask them to share their love with them. Love and hope is not what homeless needs. Thank you.
Remember when I said earlier that the city currently spends $30 million a year on the Department of Public Works and the San Francisco Police Department just to respond to our homeless population on the streets? $30 million. That doesn't even count the $10 million or so through the Department of Homelessness for the homeless outreach team. So altogether, we have about $40 million that's currently being spent to get the outcomes that we see. For that same money, we could create stable, organized, safe spaces with services for the 3,000 to 3,500 people that are currently living on our street. We need to make this a priority. It is a crisis, and we need to treat it like a crisis. And so I have developed a program and a model that we can scale up that has 60 hours of on-site service support for transitional vocational coaching, for resident empowerment organizing to live together, and for community integration support. There's actually a benefit to the neighborhoods where we have these safe, organized spaces, and we have enough underutilized city land as well as private land that we can partner with. My nonprofit created a license agreement, and we have an insurance policy, and we have a protocol so that people truly are in a safe, organized space, stabilized from that trauma of living without a toilet and secure place to sleep, and they have that pathway to healing and housing. It is possible. Make sure that whoever becomes mayor next year, we judge their progress. Did they actually get people indoors, or did they not?
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. Now candidates will have a chance to ask a question each other. Each candidate can ask one question to another candidate at his or her choice. Question 1 minute, answer 1.5 minutes. Thank you. And starting from, thank you, yeah. Supervisor Kim.
As I had mentioned, education is something that I believe is incredibly important and something I've made a central part of my platform. My question is to Senator Mark Leno. Could you talk a little bit about what you plan to do as mayor to support education, which is a very important value in our Asian American community?
We know that a college education is not only the key to success for any youth in our city, but we also know that we're going to have a shortage of about 1 million bachelor's degrees statewide by 2030. The new jobs that are being created by 2030, about 35% will require a bachelor's degree. California will only have about 30%. So to the degree that we can get more and more of our youth through to a bachelor's degree, we benefit not only that individual, his and her family, but also the community and the state as well. So building upon Supervisor Kim's Free City College Education, which is a 2-year program ending with an associate's degree, we want to follow Long Beach, California's Long Beach Promise for a San Francisco promise to get young people on a track towards a bachelor's degree from as early as 4th grade. Find some interest that they have and put them on a track so they can pursue that interest and stay in school, get through high school. You know, without a high school diploma, a child has a 7 times greater likelihood of finding his or her way into our criminal justice system. So get them through high school, and then with 2 years of City College, they will have a spot at San Francisco State University, and that we will find the way, probably through public-private partnerships, to make sure there is free state as well as free city. Thank you.
Mr. Leno, would you please ask the next question? Thank you.
I'd like to ask Mr. Greenberg a question. Richie, you and I are both small business owners for many, many years, and you've heard me talk a lot about the challenges facing the small business community, a lot of our mom and pop business owners. We see rising rents, even though we have a glut of ground floor retail space. We see the shift to online purchasing, which also makes it more difficult for brick and mortar. What are your thoughts about how we can deal with what seem to be sometimes insurmountable challenges using your expertise in the small business world?
Thank you, appreciate it. It's a very, very good question. And it's very, very applicable to our city. So in my years, 30 years of experience overall, and 17 years here in the city, helping mom and pop shops and entrepreneurs and cafes, what I'm seeing are a multitude of a mountain of regulation, of bureaucracy, permits. Everything is being, unfortunately, it seems that everything has been done to put a barrier to prevent a small business from actually starting. And I know this is not popular, but even the $15 an hour minimum wage is a problem as well. Over the years, I have seen the Board of Supervisors pass more and more regulations, mandates, burdens, taxes that are just unbearable, breaking the camel's back. We also, I believe, need to revisit realistically the formula retail law as well, because there are many local homegrown businesses here, such as Wise Sons Deli, that are expanding more and more, and will eventually hit that barrier. Phil's Coffee as well. And how do you eventually tell them, no, you can't open anymore? They're a local business. We should be supporting them, not barring them. And then I've also learned about speculation, where there are overseas investments that buy a small building and they don't wind up not even becoming landlords, and that's why a lot of these are empty as well.
Mr. Greenberg, your time is up. Would you please ask the next question?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Jane Kim, I have a question here. I recently read in the Chronicle that back in, not long ago, 2015, 2016, there was a state and Senate bill, SB 827, I think it was, that was the right to rest law. And what this does, or what was the proposal, is that it would give homeless individuals basically a separate class of rights that will allow homeless to pretty much go wherever they would like publicly, on any public property, and rest, sit, lie, potentially sleep, put up a tent. And this actually failed, and the Chronicle says that you are one of the major supporters. Can you please talk about that?
I don't remember being a major supporter of any state bill over my time on the local Board of Supervisors. But what I will say is that as we move people off the streets and off of our parks and out of encampments into shelter, we also have to make sure that we have a place to actually put them into. My experience representing the South of Market, where we see a vast majority of our homeless count in encampments, is that when we push one encampment off of one street corner one day, they only end up 1 or 2 blocks away at another street corner. And so pushing encampments isn't actually addressing the homelessness crisis that we have on our streets. What we have to do is provide more affordable housing and also more shelter beds. The city has been very reluctant to fund shelter beds because they are frankly and honestly very expensive. But in the meantime, while we quibble over this decision-making, many of our residents have to suffer as they see people suffering even more on our streets, causing litter and trash, human feces on the ground. And of course, many of these residents are understandably very sick because they live on our streets. We need to create more medical shelter beds. One of the last things I worked on with Mayor Ed Lee was he granted our office a $6 million grant to build a 24-hour medical shelter in the South of Market on Mission between 7th and 8th. We cut the ribbon on the medical shelter in December, unfortunately 1 week after he passed away. This was an initiative that was both very important to me and Mayor Ed Lee. We want to make sure that we provide shelter beds for those on the streets, but with nurses, clinicians, and psychologists.
Ms. Weiss, would you please ask the next question? Thank you.
Sure.
So it's safe to say we all want to see increased public safety and a decrease in crime. And the question is, how do we do this in a very strategic way? And so my question is to Supervisor Breed. You recently put forward a proposal for 200 additional police officers. And that will cost approximately $34 million. Supervisor Kim has pointed out that for each new police officer, it's about $171,000. Will you work with me instead, Supervisor Breed, to create a new strategic program where we take the 100 sites, the 100 blocks with the most 311 and 911 incidents for crime and public safety issues, and we can use that $34 million to invest $300,000 in each site, $300,000 for unarmed programming that can network with the police. That would still give us $4 million to work with those communities that are impacted to administer this program, and then we would be healing at the root. Rather than having 200 more armed police officers, we could hire 300 employees to do this work and target the areas that are actually experiencing the most crime to heal at the root with unarmed programming. Is that something that you'd be open to exploring instead of the 200 armed officers on the street additionally?
Thank you for the question. You know, the community that I grew up in, we didn't even talk to the police when I was a kid because there were challenges between the African American community and the police department. And when I graduated from college and started working in the community, I bridged that gap between our officers and our community because at the time, we were dealing with some of the worst violence in our city history. I was going to funerals on a regular basis. I wanted my community to feel protected too. And what I'm hearing on this campaign trail is that so many people in so many neighborhoods, especially, I mean, as someone who was raised by my grandmother, I'm very sensitive about making sure that our seniors are protected in San Francisco. So I want to continue to make sure that we have police officers on our, in our commercial corridors, in our communities. I know that police officers alone don't necessarily prevent crime on their own. I know that it takes a lot of work, but they do deter things. When they are out in the community, it's less likely, a crime is less likely to occur. And so I want us to do both. I want us to make sure that there are programs, there are opportunities for our young people, that we improve on our educational opportunities to provide them with the support and services they need so that they are a part of our communities in a way that doesn't lead to a life of crime. I want to make sure that our police officers are bilingual and that they are able to communicate with our communities as well. We need police officers despite...
Supervisor Breed, your time is up. Sorry.
Oh, I thought that said 10, sorry. Thank you.
Would you please ask next question?
Okay, thank you. So this week, my question, Supervisor Kim, there was a ballot measure called San Francisco Community Housing Act of 2018 that was just filed with the Department of Elections. This measure would impose a new parcel tax of 43 cents per gross square foot on housing parcels. And I wanted to know, do you support this measure, and would you advise your supporters to sign on to it?
I unfortunately do not know what this ballot measure is, nor have I read it, and I never endorse a measure until I have read it. So I'm so sorry that I don't have an answer to your question. That being said, I will say that I do think that we as a city need to figure out how to generate more revenue for affordable and middle-income housing. I supported the affordable housing bond that Mayor Ed Lee put on the ballot in 2015, which is generating $310 million for the production of affordable and middle-income housing, as well as low-interest home ownership loans for first-time home owners here in San Francisco and for firefighters, police, and other public safety officers. We do need to continue to make sure that we are adding revenue to our cycle every single time. The last time San Francisco passed an affordable housing bond was in 1996. We failed in 2002, and I worked on that campaign, and we failed in 2006, another campaign I worked on. Too many years passed by, almost 20 years between that bond and the one in 2015, and we have to make sure that we put it into our capital bond cycle and ensure that there's a constant flow of funding for affordable and middle-income housing.
Thank you.
You want me to ask a question to another candidate?
Any other, at your choice.
I want to ask Richard, because he and I are in a similar situation. Richie. Since January 9, 2018, many of the people misleaded by the top four. They said they're top four. So I am one of the bottom four. Richie, bottom four, and Amy, bottom four, and Michelle's not here. And the people keep saying the top four, that makes me nuts, okay? Because if you come to Chinatown today, you ask people, Ellen will be at 95, right? Am I right? So my question to Richard, how do you feel about it?
Great question, and it's not reality. The reason is because I have been included in many debates and many candidate forums. Some of the newspapers included me in the prominent top 5. And so it depends on who you ask. Yes, it is maddening. Yes, it is unfair at times. And yes, it does show absolutely that we have media bias here in the country and in this city, for sure. It depends on who you ask, as you said, but I'm experiencing it a little bit as you, maybe not as much as you, and in some cases then if you ask the Republicans, I am going to get probably 100% or close to the Republican vote, which is the second largest voting bloc in the city. Also, the no NPP, the no party preference, they also can swing however they would like and support me as well. And so it depends on who you ask. I learned very quickly from the beginning that there's going to be challenges. And I'm working with it, and we're doing the best that we can. I think we're doing an excellent job to get the word out. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Very interesting questions. Now we are open the question to our media partners. The Chinese media now can post their question. And before ask question, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Han. I'm a City Hall reporter of the World Journal. So my first question is, it's about a campaign strategy. So I was wondering, how do you feel that this election time, the Chinese people's vote is the swing vote this time?
So you want to answer the first two answers?
Yeah, the Chinese people's vote this time.
Okay. I am so proud of our community and the Asian American and Chinese American community over the last 15 years. When I first started working as a community organizer on campaigns, Chinese Americans were not voting in great numbers. And I remember in 2002 and 2003, we really struggled to get our community out to vote. 15 years later, we are now the most consistent voting base in every single election. And because the community has shown their power, there's not a single campaign that doesn't have an organizer that speaks Cantonese, that doesn't have literature in Chinese and English. This was not something that was the case even 15 years ago. And so I continue to encourage our Asian and Chinese American community to come out and vote. We have been winning seats on the Board of Education, on the Board of Supervisors, and of course, most recently in 2011 and 2015, our first Chinese American mayor after a 150-year history of being a part of the San Francisco community.
All you have to do is look at the numbers. The Chinese American and API communities are a major political force in town, and that is probably reflected in the fact that we are having multiple forums and debates within the community and around town for these communities because of their political power and their political interest in the democratic process. And that is why we are all so eager to get endorsements from community-based organizations like the Community Tenants Association, who are here today, of course, as well as from elected leaders. And so I'm so very proud and honored to have the support, the first endorsement of Betty Yee, the first endorsement of Fiona Ma, who will be our next state treasurer, Assemblyman Phil Ting, and Supervisors Norman Yee and Sandy Fuhr, along with the Democratic Party's first endorsement. So yes, take this fact to heart and make sure everyone in the API and Chinese American communities are registered to vote and get out and vote on June 5th. This used to be considered a sleeping giant, but this giant is no longer asleep and is a powerful political player in San Francisco, and the community should be proud of this fact.
It's so important that when we're doing outreach and understanding what the issues are for all the different neighborhoods in San Francisco, that we do this in a way that invites participation. And so one of the things that I've been saying from the beginning of this race is that this is a very unique race because unfortunately Ed Lee's sudden passing means that we have this position for the mayor for a year and a half. And whoever becomes mayor in June, we're going to have another mayor's race next November in 2019. So it's very important that whoever becomes mayor puts their head to the ground and just does the work and lets us measure their performance so that we know if we should renew their contract in November for another 4 years. So to help that process, I've created something called an outcomes tracker, where I've shown in 12 different categories, there's about 40, 50 things that I want us to measure, whoever becomes mayor. You can find that on my website at weissformayor.com. I had a supporter translate that outcomes tracker into Chinese, and also another person translate that into Spanish. And so it's available for us all to review and shape, because it's so important that we make sure over this next year that whoever does become mayor, we're really focusing on very specific performance metrics to make sure that we know whether or not they can do the job. So weissformayor.com, please look at that outcomes tracker. Thank you.
There are approximately 900,000 residents in San Francisco. Asian population is 35%. The voters registration is approximately 30%. So if all the Chinese, all the Asian people voted for Ellen Lee Zhao will be the winner. Here's why. The people come in here, that's why they don't allow me to go debates. This is my second debate since January 19th. I have been bullied. This is one of the reasons, because they know that I will win. So that's why they divided. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if you're seeing this, if you're a San Franciscan, if you're angry about this current situation with San Francisco, vote for Ellen Lee Zhao. I am the only person can redirect San Francisco. We are too corrupted. This is a corrupted election. To kick a Chinese candidate out of the race and tell people the top four, that is a lie, that is corruption. Especially the examiner says, there's no Chinese representation. When I am a Chinese, my parents are Chinese. I was born and made in China. And I'm Chinese American. I'm running for a better San Francisco. For all of the San Francisco who are tired, sick of the current situation, vote for Ellen Lee Zhao for mayor. I'm a social worker for social problems. Thank you, San Franciscan. Thank you. Thank you.
It's hard to follow that. Hold on a second. Okay. Reset the timer. Okay, please start again. Okay. Oh, you took my breath away. So, Mr. Leno, Senator Leno, you have received the DCCC endorsement, and I have received the RCCC endorsement. Okay, and the Republican Central Committee is made up of numerous. We've got many Chinese Americans as well, and so I'm proud to have received that endorsement. Yes, the Chinese community, the Asian Pacific Islander community is a swing vote, as is the Russian community, as is the 150,000 approximately no party preference. They are swing, if you want to call it, as well. But I'm going to say something very, very important, that what we see happening now, and as we see over and over and over again with every election cycle, that people are not paying attention to not only our priorities, but to policy. People are only looking at a recognizable name. I recognize this name. I've seen this person's poster, and they have no idea who they are voting for. They see a Chinese sign. They see in Spanish, different parts of the city. They're not paying attention to the issues. This is so important, to pay attention to the issues. Don't vote who you just recognize the face. You have to go after and vote in the person who has the best quality for the issues. Thank you.
Is the Chinese community here in San Francisco a swing vote? Probably so. I consider it a really important vote because the person who serves as the mayor of the city and county of San Francisco has to be a mayor for all San Franciscans, has to be a mayor for our Chinese community, has to be a mayor for small property owners and tenants, has to be someone who's willing to build consensus and build coalitions in order to make San Francisco better for each and every one of us. I'm proud to be supported by State Controller Betty Yee. I'm proud to be supported by Board of Equalization Board Member Fiona Ma, as well as Assembly Member David Chu, as well as Assessor Recorder Carmen Chu, and Supervisor Katie Tang. Many incredible elected leaders of the Chinese community, and I will continue to work with each and every one of them to make sure, as mayor, that the needs of our communities all over San Francisco are being addressed.
That's right. Thank you, candidates. I would like to invite a representative from Faith and the religious group, Bishop Ted Fraser, to ask a question.
How you doing, everybody? I grew up in San Francisco, and at one time, San Francisco was known as the city that knows how. We've kind of lost that over the years, and I think one of the problems has been that the citizens of San Francisco have been fragmented. Just to put a label on a person and think that you can solve a problem is not the way to do it. We have to find a way to come together as people and work together to solve these problems that we're faced with. My question is, what will you do as mayor to bring the city together once again?
Thank you. Yeah, due to the time limitation, each candidate will have only 1 minute to answer the question. Sorry about this. Would you please? Yeah. I can't remember. Yeah, maybe we just start from Supervisor Reed. Thank you.
You know, my whole life in working to accomplish the things that are important to my community had everything to do about building bridges, building relationships. I became president of the Board of Supervisors because of my relationships with my colleagues. And the fact remains that I don't tear a person down just because they're associated with a particular group. I don't tear people down just because they choose to be a Republican or anything else for that matter. I truly believe that we are better as San Franciscans when we work together. We may not get everything that we want, But when we work together and we focus on bringing communities together, that's how we're going to make sure that we address many of the challenges that we all want to see change in San Francisco for the better. I am a consensus builder. I'm prepared to bring folks together. After this race is over and I become your mayor, I will continue to work with each and every person sitting here and at this table to address many of those issues.
Thank you for the shout out to the Republicans. So I too am a consensus mayor. I will be a consensus mayor. What I have done over my 30-year career is building coalitions by bringing together people who want to start a business, people who have specific needs, and this is what I will continue to do as mayor. But here's a little bit more fundamental issue, more problem that I'm seeing. I'm a centrist. I look at things from a very logical, centered standpoint. And what we have today, unfortunately, for whatever powers and issues that, and influences that be, is our city is torn apart with left and lefter, radical left, ideological people in Board of Supervisors, in power, and in schools. And we should not be having our schools operate as a place to indoctrinate our children. I will do the best I can to stop that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am not Republican, I am not Democratic, I am nonpartisan, which means I am for you. Each one of you, I'm a people mayor. I will appoint and hire each 7 of them in here when I am elected because they are so good, but they are not as good as I am. I am working for the city and government. I'm a middle person. I am a union representative. I work for 16,000 public employees, and I work with the mayor's office. I investigate government employee complaints. I am the only one that you can trust. By doing an election, it saves the public money by not using super PAC, but not using public money. These people in here, they waste public money, more than millions and millions, to do election. You agree with me? I am Ellen Lee Zhao, a social work mayor for social work problems. I will be your mayor. I will give back 50% of my salary. I will hire all 7 of them in here and dedicate to all of the San Franciscans. Go San Franciscans!
Go San Franciscans. So my motto is outcomes over egos and radical honesty with the work that I do. And that means, how does that look in practice? That means that I give credit where it's due. I critique when necessary, when there's a way to do things that reduces harm and increases well-being. And then I also always work together for the greater good, no matter what. And so I believe in leaving the door open, even if someone has done something that I disagree with on one policy, if we can work together on another policy, I will support that. So it's important for us to be those bridge builders in this work. And in that same way, I think, you've heard some great things from every candidate up here tonight. And so it's really important for us to be working together and to really focus on those areas of expertise and passion as we work to move forward together. And guess what? There are unreasonable people in boardrooms. There are unreasonable people living on the street, living on cardboard. Let's make it a revolution of love and logic so that we support reason and logic in healing things at the root in San Francisco.
In reviewing and assessing a legislative career or career in public office, it's good to recognize not only what somebody accomplished, but how that person accomplished it. Was it done with respect and dignity for differences of opinion? Did that person really bring people of different minds together to create effective and public policy to better serve the city and the state? And I'm so glad to be able to tell you that that has been a reflection of my career, and that reflection is manifested in the fact that a majority of the Board of Supervisors has endorsed my campaign. In Sacramento, I enjoyed working with my Republican colleagues, holding true to my San Francisco values, but I could and did work across the aisle. So again, to craft the best public policy possible, and as I was leaving Not only did my Democratic colleagues praise me, but my Republican colleagues praised me, which got a lot of attention and raised a lot of eyebrows.
Mr. Leno, it's time.
Over my time on the Board of Supervisors, I have passed the most legislation and have been one of the most prolific legislators on this board. And I've only been able to introduce and pass legislation because I've been able to build coalition, build consensus, and work across the aisle. I was able to make San Francisco the only city in the country to make community college free for all of our residents. I've negotiated the most affordable and middle-income housing of any member of this board. But I didn't do that alone. I brought it by bringing people to the table, whether it was our labor union and our workers, our tenants, our community leaders, our neighborhood leaders. I get to take credit for many of the victories that we win, but I've only been able to do it by building a large coalition and by building consensus, and that is how we move our city forward. I apologize that I have to leave. It's 4 p.m., but I'm proud to have earned the endorsement of Annie Chung from Self-Help for the Elderly, Gordon Chin, founder of Chinatown Community Development Center, Community Tenants Association, and the Rose Park Democratic Club.
Your time, sorry.
And I would love to earn your support for mayor this upcoming June 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all the candidates, and thank you, audience, for coming. And this wraps our debates today. And all the candidates, good luck on June 5th. And don't forget to vote on June the 5th.